Today, Jeff Baldassari joins us on the Communicative Leader. Jeff shares his insights in leadership and the importance of culture, connection, and trust in achieving organizational success. He also chats with us about his new book, From Associate to Ambassador, which focuses on career fulfillment and professional development. Let's have some fun. Hello, and welcome to the Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah O'Million Hodges. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On the Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. Jeff, thank you for joining us today on the Communicative Leader. I'm really excited to learn from you and chat with you, hear about your book. But before we dive into that fun stuff, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself and your experience within the leadership arena?
Okay, well, thank you, Lee. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I love what you're doing with communication because that is the glue that makes things work, and it's the disconnect when things don't work. So it's a very close tie to outcomes. I've had a very diverse career. I started my career initially with practicing law at Baker Hostetler, a national law firm. Then I moved on, and I served in two different manufacturing companies as CEO for a total of 21 years. I've served on 6 different boards, both in the private sector and the public sector. And for about a 5-year stretch, I was in consulting on spend optimization to the Fortune 1000 companies. And so I've seen a lot of different angles and worn a lot of different hats throughout my career.
Yeah, excellent. I always feel like these are the richest conversations because you're drawing from such vast experience, and I'm really excited to hear more about it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
this next question is a perfect tie-in to that introduction and thinking about, across these industries, across these positions that you've had. Can you share with us some of those key leadership principles that you've learned as a C-suite executive? And then maybe how they've guided your approach to leading teams to achieving goals and being successful.
It comes down to one simple common denominator, and that is never underestimate the power of culture. It's your
I love that.
your ability to connect with people is everything. If everything else doesn't matter, if you can't make that connection, the ability to motivate, manage, influence, or inspire people, those 4 things, nothing else matters. You can have the greatest strategies in the world, they won't work if you don't get the culture pulled together. My father, who was a very successful business person in his career, once told me, back in, I was probably in my 30s, he said to me, everything in life is easy until people get involved. And he was saying it where, if you can figure out that combination of how to connect with people from the factory floor to the boardroom and in between, that's the secret sauce for organizational success and sustainability too. Not in the pure sense of the term sustainability, but to have a sustainable outcome. Because if you don't have that connection between people and the interconnection amongst all the team members of the organization, the sustainable livelihood of whatever the idea is, the strategy is, the challenge you're trying to overcome, it will not last without that connection.
Yeah, and thank you for that thoughtful response. And I think culture is something that people will give a lot of lip service to, but they don't, dive into it and really figure out the ingredients of culture or what their culture should be in contrast to others. So thank you for raising that point. I think that's one that, again, is too often overlooked. So go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, to your point, Leah, about the lip service, or maybe it's a cursory statement. People flippantly say that, culture is the most important, or people are our greatest asset. Okay, that's fine and good, but it's getting down into the trenches of how to make the connection with people. And I'd love to chat more about that, but how do you connect with people? Because even in my book, which we'll talk about a little bit, it's all about the connection you have with people, that being your support staff, your colleagues,
Yep.
and your clients with respect to the book. But even within an organization, it's that connection. What are the daily activities you can do as a leader and to get others to do that create that connection and then transform that culture? Because
Yep.
people talk about, oh, I want to scale my business. Well, you have to start with the culture. If you don't infuse and transform that culture and solidify it, nothing else matters, as I said before. But how do you go about doing that? And it's just not putting out fluffy bunny stories and all these
Yep.
go get them statements. But it's daily consistent activities that you need to do, and the team has to do, that will achieve that outcome.
Yeah, bingo. I think you're right. It's a consistency and those, in my world, we call it everyday talk. What is it that we're saying every day? And what does that say about us? Because as you're saying, I think so many organizations either err way too much on the soft side, like you're saying, or once a year or every 18 months, they'll do something huge and forget about it for another 12 to 18 months. And wonder why things aren't going the way that they had hoped. So
Right. Absolutely.
So you've mentioned your book, and I'd like to talk more about this. And I know that I want to understand the inspiration behind the book, and then how your perspective has evolved since the original writing began in 1993.
Yeah, the book that I wrote, as you noted, Leah, that I did write it in 1993, but I did not set out to write the book when I did initially. The inspiration for the book was, I was at Baker Hostetler. I was loving it there, doing, it was it was a great time in my career. And I wanted to become a corner office partner. So I started observing and noting, well, what made them different? We were the sixth, when I left Baker in 95, we were the 16th largest law firm in the country.
Okay.
And by attorney count. And, what I wondered about the Cleveland office where I was practicing law was the largest of all the offices nationwide that we had. And we had 7 floors. So we're talking about 28 attorneys out of nearly 200.
Wow.
Well, what made them special? What made them different? And so that's what I started taking notes on. And it wasn't where they went to law school. It wasn't where their field of practice. I just started noting down their activities, their behaviors. And I just made all these observations, and then it just aggregated to a lot of stuff. And noting, like, what did they do that was different than others? Or what did they consistently do that was different than others? And so then I pivoted and then wrote the book. And then if you can imagine, back in 1993, the internet existed, but it really wasn't the tool that it is today. Email was more internal. You didn't externally email people. So if you can imagine writing a book, my secretary actually typed it up on a floppy disk, but I printed it out. Thank goodness I printed it out. And I put it in the mail and sent it to publishers and waited for 3 to 4 weeks to get an answer if they wanted to publish it. And so I had a few that did, but I didn't like the format they wanted to do it in. So I put it into storage, and it sat for literally 30 years until last summer. And what I found fascinating, the world had changed, but a lot of the points that I had written down and noted through my observations, they were timeless. They could have been written in 1963 or the year 2053. It doesn't matter. These were timeless principles. Again, they were people principles, directly or indirectly, that will never go out of style, because that's how people are. That's how you're going to, again, we go back to culture. That's how you're going to make that connection with people at different levels within an organization or outside the organization. And so what was fascinating for me in the writing of the book, which is titled, I renamed it, in the book's titled From Associate to Ambassador. It's to become something more than just a partner, to be an ambassador to the firm, even though it's not a formal title, but it's directed towards law students, summer interns, and junior associates. The people that want to be more than just a partner to law firm. They want to do something a little more special, and also have better career fulfillment and be less vulnerable within their career, not just to be a subject matter expert, but to bring something to the table beyond just your expertise, because those expertises come and go, and you're vulnerable in those roles. And if you can take more control of your career, that's what will help you do. But what I found fascinating it was like having a conversation with my 30-year self, 30-year-old
Yeah.
self, 30 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what I noted when I was doing it. I remembered literally the partners that I was observing when I wrote down
Mm-hmm.
these statements, what I observed about them. I don't put that in the book, but I do
Yeah.
remember why, which
Yeah.
partner did this, which partner
Mm-hmm.
did that. And what I found fascinating was I knew when I was 30 years old, this was important. But what I
Mm-hmm.
didn't appreciate was the magnitude of the importance or the gravity of the importance.
Mm-hmm.
30 years later, having run companies and been on
Mm-hmm.
boards, all the things in between, consulting,
Mm-hmm.
um, you then live it. And so you weren't,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of the difference between observing from the stands at a football game
Yep.
versus
Yep.
putting a helmet on and getting in the game. And
Yeah.
then when you're in it, all those decades later, 3 decades later, having
Mm-hmm.
experienced these issues, then I thought, wow, I get it now. I knew when I was 30 it was important,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't
Yep.
appreciate how important until I lived it or experienced it firsthand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how powerful, and what a neat experience for you to be able to pick that up. And like you said, when we're thinking about things like these everyday activities for organizational and personal success, for thinking about interacting with others, building trust, negotiating conflict, those are things like early 1900s, we can fast forward as well. They're always going to be helpful because they're not going away.
Right.
So I'm really excited to read that book. I love reading anything related to leadership in organizations.
Yeah,
And I'm
well, thanks.
hoping as we
One of the
go
things that
ahead.
I think I should have noted was, even though it's
Yeah.
directed towards law students
Yep.
and junior associates and summer
Mm-hmm.
interns, 80% of this book could apply to any industry, any career path. It's about, again, career fulfillment and accelerating professional
Mm-hmm.
development. If you could learn this today, you don't have to wait
Yeah.
30 years to get there. You could learn it in
Ex-
your 20s or your 30s instead of your 40s or your 50s.
yes.
And
Yes.
and again, it doesn't matter what the industry is. The vast majority of this book can be applied to any job, anywhere, and in any leadership role.
Excellent. And I'm hoping as we go through some of these other questions, you'll kind of pull from the book to give us some previews and some insights.
Sure.
So, Jeff, when I was getting ready for our conversation, I was thinking about all of this incredible work that you've done. And I found myself thinking about mentoring and empowerment. And I know that you've really excelled with empowering personnel around you, mentoring others. So, can you talk to us about, the importance of mentorship in leadership development and how it's impacted you as a leader?
I think the two most important things about mentoring, either receiving or providing, um, one is it accelerates your professional development. It again,
Mm-hmm.
like we just talked about, if you can learn from someone who's been there and you could
Mm-hmm.
learn earlier, you don't have to wait. If they tell you if you hit your head on the wall, it's going to hurt, you don't
Yep.
have to trust them.
Yep.
You're not going to bang your head on the
Mm-hmm.
wall and find out the hard way. You don't have to wait 20 years or 10 years to get there. You can learn it
Mm-hmm.
now. If you can accept it and be coachable, if you can take what you're being told and respect the individual that's mentoring you, that will help you accelerate your
Yeah.
professional development. And then you're gonna be able to learn more, not only in a compressed time frame, but the
Mm-hmm.
breadth of what you learn. You could take it another step,
Yep.
and go beyond that. The second thing is I think the bond that's created is very important within an organization. Now you can have a mentor outside your organization, which that's just as good. But if you have a mentor within the company or firm that you're in, that bond is special, and
Mm-hmm.
it creates a better retention, to employment retention within the firm, within the organization.
Yep.
It again holds that closeness between the parties. There's something special about it, and
Mm-hmm.
that's important to have that. Again, that impacts the culture. So when you start seeing people around you, you're not the only one being mentored. If everyone has a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
which a great organization will have that,
Yep.
um, that again affects the culture. It brings people together. Maybe not
Mm-hmm.
directly, but indirectly, we're all in the same boat. We're all learning from
Mm-hmm.
someone we're close to. We have that bond.
Mm-hmm.
We're accelerating our professional development. We're advancing, the organization in some way, shape, or form, as well as our own career. And again, it goes back to fulfillment as well, because if one of the quotes I have in my book is about excellence, and for something to be excellent, it has to be fun and profitable.
Mm.
And if we're not having fun and we're not
Yeah.
making profits, what the hell are we doing here?
Yeah,
Okay?
exactly.
And I
Like
think
that.
mentorship contributes towards that. It will be sharing best practices, not the only practice.
Yeah.
And things do evolve.
Yeah.
We all learn better ways. You have to be dynamic, but learning best practices, you don't have to, again, bang your head on the wall. The company or the firm can become more profitable, and you're going to enjoy it and have fun because you're going to get a quicker positive reaction or outcome by following in the footsteps of others that have done that as well. And so I think that's what's really special about mentorship.
Yeah, and you've hit on so many important points because mentorship is phenomenal, but you're right, you need the fit there. You need to be in a place where you're ready to be coached, where you can demonstrate respect, even when you don't like what they're saying, and recognizing it's a feedback loop. So that leads us to trust. And I'm wondering how you have, what you have found what you found to be successful in cultivating trust in teams and across organizations, and why you see trust as being such a critical component of excellence.
Yeah, because if trust is so important, because if someone doesn't trust you, they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to believe what you're saying is the truth. And you're going to have a hard time, we talk about a leadership role, getting those to follow and to become leaders. So trust, I think, boils down to three components: consistency, honesty, and respect. You have to be honest with people. You have to tell them the good and you have to tell them the bad. Now, the tonality that you use and the manner in which you do it is important. So it's received, but you need to be honest with whoever you're speaking with. You have to consistently speak with and communicate with people. You can't just be hot and cold, like you were mentioning at the beginning. Okay, we're going to do this we're going to have a pizza party and we're going to kick off this program. And then next thing you know, you don't hear about it again for 6 months or a year or whatever it may be. It's every day, consistently reinforcing messaging or extending the message, branching out, creating that labyrinth of information. And so that consistent, honest communication is key. And then the last part is respect. And what I mean by that, how you earn respect, is it's twofold. One is you're by your as a role model, you're walking the talk. That's important. It's very important. You can't say, do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
You have to walk the talk that you're providing. But also, and this is one of the things I learned, in my last role as a CEO, we had a large workforce. We were manufacturing rubber fitness flooring, and over one half of our workforce were ex-felons. So we had a very unusual workforce, and yet we were scaling the business. We had more than doubled our business in 1 year. We were adding a lot of employees. But how do you gain the trust of this population? How do you get through to them? And this is when I learned it's not by just compliments are important, either external, direct compliments or publicly complimenting someone versus privately complimenting someone. That's important. But what I did learn, and this is where the trust comes in, in this environment, it became very apparent, more so than traditional environments that I had been in before this. And that is, ask somebody their opinion. What do you think we should do here?
Yeah.
When you ask for someone's opinion, you're telling them, implicitly, I respect what you have to say. I believe you have something worthwhile to contribute. And that question, that simple question, what do you think we should do? I watched it happen in my last role, direct, from the sidelines or when I was in meetings, running meetings. But I also got our leaders to ask those simple questions. That I watched how it empowered the culture, it empowered the people, it brought everyone together. Because when someone's asked, "What do you think?" they understand that now they're being respected, their opinion has value. And then when it gets implemented, you have the pride that, wow, they listened to me. They didn't do everything I thought. They did most of it, or they did some of it, whatever it may be. And that really makes a huge difference in the collective trust and then direct
Mm-hmm.
one-on-one trust that goes on. So again, the consistency, the honesty, and and the trust, or excuse me, the respect creates that
Mm-hmm.
environment of trust for an organization.
Yeah. And then, you have that empowerment too, and that engagement. And like you said, it's a point of pride, but recognizing I can make a difference. And I'm not a titled leader, or I'm a lower ranking leader. So yeah,
Mm,
really, really powerful example.
yes.
I've also found myself wondering, and again, you've worked in these, across industries, how you find that balance of innovation and adaptability. So, how do we maintain that core organizational values, our core leadership principles, but then also as an organization and helping our employees to kind of flex, innovate, and adapt?
I think the importance is you have to think in terms of evolution. Um, you realize, we all know, the world has always been and always will be dynamic. It's always changing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe today it changes at a faster pace than it did 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That would be true. And it may change even quicker or faster in the next 10 to
Mm-hmm.
20 years. But it's always going to change. So you can't bring a static approach to a dynamic environment. It won't work.
Yeah.
But to your point, Leah, we have
Mm-hmm.
to balance, what has worked. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that's why you can't say, well, that worked yesterday, it won't work today. Rather than taking that dramatic or drastic approach, evolve. So if it's not working as well, whatever it may be, whatever we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about, whether it's operational efficiency or whether it's sales generation, or reporting of information, look at it through the lens of how can we evolve? How can we make it better without completely tearing it down? Sometimes things
Mm-hmm.
have to be torn down. You have to move on.
Yep.
But that's more the exception. It's more of an
Mm-hmm.
evolution of using more tools, a slightly different approach. There's opportunities today that you didn't have 5 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago, and now today it is available. It is accessible. It is affordable. Um, and so, you look at a lot of things today where bringing something to market, the cost of doing so is going down to almost zero in some cases,
Mm-hmm.
depending on whatever the topic may be.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, again, 10 years ago, it'd be cost prohibitive to try and do something. Today, we have that opportunity.
Yep.
But we're just evolving to accelerate. Again, there's some
Mm-hmm.
things that never change. The content may never change. Who we are as a company, who we are as a firm will never change. That's our
Mm-hmm.
identity. That's how the market recognizes us. And we've built that brand. People buy on brand,
Yep.
buy off of emotion too. So
Mm-hmm.
they're driven by their emotion, and they use, that they will intellectually justify or rationalize their emotional decisions. But knowing that's the reality, and realizing that your customer base, and even the ones you aren't serving that you want to serve, they're going
Mm-hmm.
to do it based off of brand. And so
Yep.
if you can find better ways to evolve your brand, or evolve extending your brand either to your existing audience or a new audience,
Mm-hmm.
or again internally, don't forget the internal marketing, because
Yes. Yep.
you've got to extend there. But I think that's the most important thing, is the evolution rather than the discontinuation of something. Just because the world changed, we got to do something completely different. No, just
Yep.
slightly different. Usually that's the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a really accessible one, because I think for a lot of people, change equals scary. But instead of seeing it as a challenge or an obstacle, you gave great examples of how there might be new opportunities. Right? When we started this, maybe 3, 5 years ago, this wasn't an option. Now it is. So
Yep.
recognizing that there's a lot of room for growth and other positives we might not have anticipated.
Yes, that's true.
So, Jeff, my next question is about communication. And I imagine you've seen a lot of this and you kind of pulled it up and raised it up in your book. So, I'm wondering if you can discuss the role of effective communication in driving organizational success, and maybe other communication strategies that you've used or you've seen others use to help people be successful in a team or across the organization?
I think with successful communication, there's a lot of components to it, as you know. I mean, you're an expert on communication, but active listening is very important, is to listen. And I think, appreciative inquiry, when AI, I know everyone talks about AI today, artificial intelligence, but prior to that, there was AI was, appreciative inquiry. And giving voices and soliciting perspectives from throughout the organization is key. Again, we go back to that culture, the connecting with people. Whether when you're at the law firm and you're trying to build your career, it's like you can't take anyone for granted. Everyone is important, and also nobody has an exclusive license on all the great answers. You don't. You can't.
Yep.
So if you have someone on the factory floor, they're going to see things different than someone in the C-suite. Someone in the accounting department is going to see something different than the person in the sales department. And so, even in the law firm, again, it's the support staff versus your colleagues, the attorneys, fellow attorneys, or your clients. Your client sees the matter different than you do.
Yeah.
And, and so going back to an organization and through appreciative inquiry is, if we're trying to improve something or change something, like we just talked to, like the last question, how are we going to evolve to stay with the times or get ahead of the curve? You need to bring those voices to the table, and I don't care about titles. You can't put too much emphasis on titles, because you need to listen. Because again, where everyone sits, they're looking at the organization, the problem, and the opportunity through a different lens. Now, maybe you as the leader have to connect the dots. You can't expect everyone to do that, and most people can't. That's not what the process is about. The process is about engaging in the solicitation of perspective, information, recommendations, frustrations, whatever. This is how you uncover, sometimes organizations are held back and they don't know why. They feel like they're doing everything right. But you know why they're not getting ahead? Because they're unaware. There's unknown problems they haven't solved. And they need that input, because you're not looking for the input, the person where you're asking a variety of people for information. You're not asking them to solve it. Just share your observations collectively. The next step will be, let's collectively try and solve it, good or bad. But the key thing is to invite that conversation, invite that perspective, start that process of communicating throughout the organization and involving people, and that's how things get done. Either eliminating challenges or capturing opportunities.
Yeah, and I really like that idea. You talked about the leader connecting the dots, and I think that's such a powerful way to kind of show one of those, I think it's invisible roles of leadership that a lot of times, we don't necessarily see. But you're right, when you're inviting the conversation, and then it's the leader through active listening, figuring out what are these common themes? What is it that's holding us back? What have I missed?
Yeah.
Or where can we go next?
Right. Absolutely.
Excellent. So, Jeff, this question, I'm thinking about current and future challenges. So, looking ahead and, especially just finishing this book, this leadership business landscape of today, what are some of these challenges that are ongoing? And then what suggestions do you have for individuals to be effective in leading and communicating?
I think, from the book standpoint, and even today, the most important thing is don't rely on technology too much. I have seen that over the years where leaders rely too much on technology, and all technology does, not all, but primarily, it just accelerates the collection of data, the processing of data, but it's still data. And the reason I say don't rely on technology too much, and where the book goes, again, the book is about managing, motivating, inspiring, and influencing people. That's it. Those four things. Now, I'll mention that a couple times in the book, but when you're going through 188 pages, you might, if you take a step back and go, oh, it's not always a direct connection to a people issue. It could be an indirect connection to people. But what happens today is you see people trying to run a company by a spreadsheet. Well, gosh, if we just do this, they start getting into the ratios and the formulas. They get into these academic exercises, and they've forgotten that those numbers represent decisions and behavior of people, period.
Yeah.
And like you brought up at the beginning of our conversation today, you could say, oh, people are our greatest asset. Culture is everything. Well, unless you get down in the trenches and figure out, how am I going to connect with people? How am I going to internally market? And again, consistently, honestly, and in a respectful way, communicate with my teams and get my teams to do that throughout the organization. It just can't be you. This has to be compounded internally. That's how you change behavior. That's how you change outcomes. Because once people feel empowered, they're going to do much more than you ever dreamed or even thought to ask them to do, because they emotionally own it. They emotionally feel connected to the challenge, to the opportunity, to each other. And if you can overcome that, then everything else will take care of itself. Then your technology are going to show on your spreadsheets that the numbers are better. But don't play the game of sitting there academically, playing with these numbers, because then you're being manipulative with numbers and ultimately with people. And nobody likes to be manipulated. Nobody likes the micromanager. Because that is the worst thing you can do. And typically it comes from technology, because the spreadsheet tells me this, the data tells me that, the dashboard says this. No, get past all that. Get down to the roots of your connection to motivate, manage, inspire, and influence people. That will solve your problems. And then your spreadsheets and your dashboards and everything else in between will all look a lot better, and you could be happy.
Yeah. I was thinking in your response of the power of empowerment, because I always think it's ironic. Typically, if we have a lot more decision-making power, the further we are from being client-facing or doing that actual work. And so when we cultivate a culture where people are empowered, then we know that they can come to us with things that are going well, that aren't going well, and the ability for them to make the decisions. And like you said, to perform in ways that we wouldn't have, expected of them when we just put them in the small box.
Yeah. And the thing is, when we talk about empowerment, you're going to bring out the best in people, and you're not going to treat them like a disposable asset.
Yeah.
Like just something else within the organization. That's where you say, oh, people are my greatest asset. Well, treat them that way. And how can you treat them that way? Through, again, empowerment, because then they're going to step up. If they're told what to do, they're going to do the bare minimum. They're going to punch that clock at 8:00 in the morning, and they're going to punch it out at 5. They're going to do exactly what they're told. And if things fall between the cracks, ain't my problem. And you don't want that culture. And a lot of companies have that culture. Or you have the contrast and the conflict within departments. In manufacturing, it's always between the sales team and operations. They have a love-hate relationship. And but if you can find ways as a leader to empower, interdependently within the organization, that conflict goes down. It's always going to be there. I mean, you can't get away from it completely, but you can reduce it dramatically. And again, you can completely transform the culture by getting people to cooperate and not think in silos. That's not my job. You get that mindset versus this is our initiative. We are doing something, versus I am only responsible for this little corner of the world. And if it doesn't fall in my corner, I don't care about it. You don't want that mindset.
Yeah. So many important things to think about. And Jeff, this leads us to our 2 final questions, and they are connected. And the way we end all of our episodes of the Communicative Leader is with advice or a tip or a challenge. First, for our friends who are titled leaders, our managers, directors, anyone in, has that formal decision-making power. And then the second part is, again, advice, tip, challenge for employees across all industries, across all ranks.
Okay. Well, I've kind of touched on for both of these, but
Mm-hmm.
my answer as a
Yep.
leader is appreciative inquiry, period. You
Mm-hmm.
you have to solicit ideas, recommendations, complaints. You have to make it a safe environment in a
Mm-hmm.
company that someone can make a mistake. I mean, you want to prevent catastrophic ones, obviously,
Yep.
but let someone make mistakes. That's how people learn. We all have made mistakes. We all have learned from our
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. That's what experience is, right? But you have to create a safe environment where people can speak up, because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you'll have people on the factory floor or the warehouse or out in the field in sales. They won't say anything because they don't want to get in trouble. Because your
Mm-hmm.
culture is shoot the messenger.
Yep.
You don't realize you have that, but the people that are working with you, for
Yeah.
you, or around you, that's what they feel. And I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
jeopardize my job. I'm
Yep.
going to keep my mouth shut and just do what I'm
Mm-hmm.
told. You want to make it safe where people can speak up. So as a leader, my recommendation is invite input, all input, good, bad, and
Mm-hmm.
indifferent, from
Yep.
throughout the organization, top to bottom. Get different perspectives. Again, we go back to that appreciative inquiry
Mm-hmm.
idea or approach.
Yeah.
That would make you a great leader, because when you're getting
Mm-hmm.
information from all angles of the company, you can, like you brought up, you can connect the dots better. You
Mm-hmm.
can form a better dynamic strategy going forward, either to correct problems, to uncover those problems you didn't realize you had, to seek opportunities, to go into new
Mm-hmm.
channels of revenue that you couldn't get into. Um, and you can keep adapting and keep evolving. So that would be
Mm-hmm.
my answer to leaders. For the employees, this is where, again, you go back to, don't think in terms of just me. Don't
Mm-hmm.
act or behave like you're in a silo. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is my department and all I got to worry about
Yep.
is my little world. Now, I'm not, advocating or instructing employees to think, well, I got to take on the responsibility of the whole company. Well, that's way beyond my pay grade, whatever
Yes.
phrase is
Yep.
used to describe that.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to think about, maybe it's not your job to solve it, but it is your job to create awareness of it, not to get someone in
Mm-hmm.
trouble or to, I'm going to be the big hero, but to raise, again, if you have that, say, if you're working at a company where you have a
Yep.
safe environment where you can bring things up and you
Mm-hmm.
consistently have conversations, again, not just a pizza party, once a
Yep.
quarter, or, half time,
Mm-hmm.
twice a year, whatever it may be,
Mm-hmm.
or a suggestion box where it's impersonal. You got
Yep.
to talk to people. You got to look them in the eye. I mean, Zoom
Mm-hmm.
calls are great, and sometimes that's all you can do, but you
Yep.
got to get in front of people. You got to listen.
Mm-hmm.
And as an
Yep.
employee, you want to share perspective, again, about gratitude. Thank you for this opportunity. About, hey, this could make it better. Did you know we're screwing up
Mm-hmm.
over here? Or this doesn't make
Mm-hmm.
sense to me. And I think
Mm-hmm.
internal marketing, if I can toggle back and forth
Yeah.
between leader and employee, internal marketing is just as important as external marketing.
Yep.
People need to know what's going on. Don't keep them
Yep.
in the dark. Even if you have appreciative inquiry
Mm-hmm.
approach where you're inviting, 10 people to the table from throughout the organization, but you have 100 employees or 200 employees or 500 employees,
Yep.
that's only a small, subset. You've got to make sure the other people, the other 90, the other 490,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the number is,
Mm-hmm.
employees know what the heck is going on. And more importantly, why
Yep.
are we doing this? Now,
Yes.
not everybody is going to agree. I mean, we're not all going to hold
Mm-hmm.
hands and sit around the
Yep.
campfire and sing Kumbaya. That's not
Mm-hmm.
going to happen. You want that friction, you want that tension, but you have to keep in mind you have these forces at two ends of the spectrum, pulling in opposite directions. And
Mm-hmm.
you got a whole bunch of people in the middle. And if you keep informing as a leader the entire organization, you're going to get the battle is going to be won by we're going to pull in this direction and go where collectively we all want to go, and you're going to get there too, because
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get more buy-in. You're going to get emotion. You're going to get more emotional investment, more emotional ownership
Mm-hmm.
by more people than just those 10. You're going to get 450. You're not going to get them all, but you're going to get most of them. And then ultimately, when you get that massive shift in the right
Yeah.
direction, the people that don't want to play ball, they're going to leave,
Yeah.
or they're going to get on board. It's going to be one of the
Mm-hmm.
two. But as a leader, internally marketing is so important to get the
Yeah.
word out. Again, more than just we're doing this, why we're doing this. Here's what's
Yeah.
coming up. Here's what's exciting about what we're doing here. Do you see the change? And again, things of that nature. And again, going back to the
Mm-hmm.
employee side, look beyond just the scope of your job description. Don't
Mm-hmm.
feel limited that's all. Because again, is this the only job you want at this company? Do you want to advance? Even if it's laterally, it doesn't have to be. I don't want to be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be the CEO. I don't want to be
Mm-hmm.
a vice president. I don't want to be a director. I don't
Yeah.
even want to be a manager. I want to stay at the level I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you want to be in a different department and have
Yeah.
again, a different experience. You love the company
Mm-hmm.
and you love what you're doing. You love the level of responsibility that you have. You love the level of contribution that you've been given. You
Mm-hmm.
love the fact that you take advantage of it. But maybe you want to do different things within the company down the road.
Mm-hmm.
So look beyond your job description and don't just think about yourself. Think in terms of teams, not in terms
Mm-hmm.
of silos. And that's a kind of a long-winded answer to those two questions, but that would be my
Mm-hmm.
advice to both groups.
No, it's really helpful. And I think when you were talking, I was thinking about how much time we spend, thinking about being good leaders, strong leaders, effective leaders, authentic leaders, but we don't spend that time thinking about the responsibility of being a good follower, of being a good employee and an effective employee, and what that responsibility looks like. So
Yep.
thank you for raising that point.
Thank you. Yep.
Well, Jeff, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you today. I'm really excited to read your book. I know that our listeners will as well, because there's so many thoughtful, pragmatic, tips that we can use now to be successful. So thank you again for sharing your time and expertise.
Well, I appreciate it, Leah. And if people want to find out more about the book,
Mm-hmm.
I have a website from associatetoambassador.com. And there's a newsletter. I would recommend signing up for the newsletter because if the newsletter you get every other week, you get an excerpt out of the book. You get one page out of the book, essentially. And it'll give you a flavor for what it is. You want to purchase the book, you can get it as
Awesome.
an ebook or as a paperback right there. There's connections to Amazon and Barnes and Noble and everybody else is on that website. And you'll find a lot of information about myself and in the book itself
Mm-hmm.
as well. So thank you for this opportunity. It's been a lot of fun discussing this with you. I love what you're doing with communication because it is so, so important in this world. Again, it doesn't matter what you do, the ability to communicate verbally and in writing and all the components that go into it. There's a lot of them. It makes a world of
Mm-hmm.
difference.
Thank you. I'm going to take you to classes and help me convince the undergrads of the world. All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on the Communicative Leader.